Broadcast Center. Jared Moffat with Regulate RI. Thank you for coming in today.
Happy to be here. Thanks.
I appreciate it. Been a busy few days. It's been a busy few years.
That's right. Yeah, we're at it again. So, but this year it's different. Massachusetts, I really think, changes the dynamic quite a bit. We were happy to see, 4 states, including Massachusetts, pass ballot initiatives to regulate marijuana like alcohol. And I think that the fact that it's right over the border right there means that if Rhode Island doesn't do it this year, we're going to be donating a lot of tax revenue, a lot of jobs, and really helping their economy while we fall behind.
Now, why did they take the hiccup in Massachusetts to take the step to say we're going to delay implementation of that? Talk to us a little bit about that.
Sure. They felt like they needed a little bit more time to set up the system, to set up regulations. I'm not sure that was entirely appropriate or necessary, but they felt like they needed some more time, and it really doesn't change the dynamic. They moved the date from opening sales to January 1st of 2018 to July 1st. Really doesn't change the dynamic for us. Next year, stores are going to be open, and they're going to be right along the border, places like Fall River, Attleboro, Seekonk, and people already go. Rhode Islanders already go over to Massachusetts quite a bit, so I suspect that they'll be picking up, probably some marijuana as well.
So you had released a statement this morning, as a lot's going on right now. Attorney General Kilmartin had an event with other stakeholders basically opposing the legalization effort. And you had a few key points that you wanted to make about that I wanted to let you share with viewers.
Yeah, well, the first thing is I think the Attorney General's undermining his credibility a little bit. They're going around to the town councils. They have this draft template resolution that they're trying to get the town councils to pass. And we actually did a point-by-point rebuttal of all the claims that are made in there. There's a lot of inaccurate statements. They're misrepresenting the legislation that's being considered, and so they're just trying to sow confusion. And I think we heard more of that at the press conference today. And, we really wonder, is it really appropriate for the Attorney General and his staff, full-time government employees to be going around lobbying against an issue that 3 out of 5 Rhode Islanders support? It's one thing to have an opinion and, provide information when requested, but it's another thing to sort of launch this full campaign to each town in the state and spread this misinformation. So, I just wonder from a taxpayer point of view, when there's other issues that could be addressed, is this the best thing that the Attorney General could be doing with their time and resources?
Now, you've had the official kickoff again this year. They had the event today. What do you have planned in the coming weeks?
Sure, yeah. I think you're going to see more of our coalition out there making the case. We'll probably do a large rally at some point. We're certainly going to be at the State House quite a bit. The committee hearings are going to be coming up in a few weeks, we think. So we're going to be ramping up, and we're going to be getting our grassroots volunteers active. So I would encourage anyone that wants to be a part of that to contact us at regulateRI.com.
And I know we had had former Congressman Patrick Kennedy on yesterday. You saw the arguments, and you know the arguments that he's made on the other side. He said that legalizing marijuana would be throwing gasoline on the addiction fire. What do you have to respond to that?
Well, it just flies in the face of the actual scientific research that we know about. He's basically saying marijuana is a gateway. That's been debunked time and time again. One study in particular in 2014 came out and found that states with more legal access to marijuana actually had 25% fewer opioid overdoses than states with stricter laws. So what we see is that there's actually a substitution effect. In states that allow more legal access to marijuana, people use marijuana instead of things like pain pills and things like that. And so it's doing the opposite. And the other part of it is the legislation that's being considered could put a considerable amount of money to help fund additional treatment and recovery services. So right now we're not funding opioid treatment and addiction services where they need to be, and by taxing marijuana we can put that money to good use by addressing the opioid crisis.
Now, I had seen folks question the congressman's role in certain groups addressing the opioid crisis with pharma companies. Can you speak a little bit to that?
Well, I think people are suspicious of where this opposition comes from, and it's a little hard to figure out where Project Sam's funding comes from. But we do know that some of the other anti-legalization, anti-medical marijuana campaigns have been funded by pharmaceutical industries, and so some have raised questions about are they doing this to protect their industry? And I don't know, so I don't make those accusations, but it certainly does sort of make me wonder what's going on when they accuse us of things. It'd be interesting to see where they're getting the bulk of their funding as well. Again, I think that we really shouldn't get into that. We should stay on the substance of the issue. But it's unfortunate to hear some of these sort of ad hominem attacks.
And one of the things I had asked the former congressman, why would legalization be bad for Rhode Island? So I'm going to ask you, why would legalization be good for Rhode Island?
Well, first and foremost, we have a failed policy right now. So when a problem exists, you need to fix it. And so it fixes the problem that exists now where people are being punished for using marijuana, which is safer than alcohol. It creates public health and safety problems by having an illicit market control the industry, similar to what we saw under alcohol prohibition. So number one, it's for public health and safety. When you regulate marijuana, the consumer knows what they're getting. It's labeled, it's tested for potency. You make sure there's no contaminants in it. And again, by getting rid of the illicit market, you now have legitimate businesses that have oversight, accountability, and again are regulated by government. So that's better than having an out-of-control illicit market. And then number two, on top of that, the bonus is that if we get a foot in this emerging industry and this economy, we're going to create a lot of jobs. I mean, in Colorado, they have over 30,000 active occupational licenses for people employed directly by marijuana businesses. And in addition to that, that doesn't even count people like electricians, accountants, security guards, things like that are employed by these businesses. So there's all sorts of ripple effects. And then again, the tax revenue. Right now, all this money is flowing into the hands of illicit dealers. It's fueling crime in our communities. Instead, we can redirect that money into vital programs like funding opioid treatment, recovery services. We could use it to invest in our schools. That's what Colorado is doing. $40 million a year goes to rebuilding their schools. So there's all sorts of positive benefits, even if you're not someone who uses marijuana. People ask me, well, if I don't use marijuana, why should I care? Public health, public safety, jobs, and tax revenue. That's what we stand to gain.
And you had mentioned the Attorney General's efforts at the town-by-town level. So explain to us and explain to viewers a little bit, is it going to be the battles fought at the town level for allowing establishments to open up operations? So how does that differ from, you're looking at statewide legislation now. What can towns do and what can't they do? And why are things being handled at the town level?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that the Attorney General is trying to convince the town councils to pass these resolutions, which are just basically statements telling the General Assembly, don't pass this. So that's what the resolution does. There's no legal, really, ramifications of this. It's essentially just lobbying. It's lobbying the towns to say, tell the representatives in the General Assembly not to do this. And as I said earlier, it's filled with inaccurate statements. It misrepresents the legislation. One of the areas where it misrepresents the most is by saying that towns don't have control over these businesses. So the legislation clearly says that towns can introduce any ordinances, so zoning ordinances of where it can be located, any types of regulations in terms of hours of operation. They can impose additional sanctions if businesses break the rules, things like that. So there is significant local control. And then on top of that, if a town doesn't want any marijuana establishments in their jurisdiction, they can vote in a referendum to ban marijuana establishments. So the Attorney General is telling towns that they don't have any control, that they won't be able to contain this. That's absolutely false. It's just right there in the legislation, and it's really unfortunate to see the Attorney General sort of muddying the waters on this important issue.
Have we seen that play out in other states that have had legalization of these town-by-town battles, or is that comparing apples and oranges?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen in other states that there are some towns that embrace it and see it for what it is, which is an economic engine, a tax revenue boon, and some that, say we don't want it. And I think that that's appropriate, and that's what the legislation in Rhode Island would do as well, is allow each town to make their own decision about whether they want it.
How many legislators do you have on the record in support, and how many would you say are undecided at this point?
Yeah, it's tough to get them on the record. It's hard to put an exact number on that, but we do feel confident that if the bill is allowed to be voted on, which unfortunately, in the 6 years that we've been trying to do this, we've never gotten a single vote, even in committees. We're hoping that changes this year. We feel very confident that we have the support to pass it out of both chambers, in the Senate and the House. We've been working with folks for years. We've been educating lawmakers on this issue. And again, it's hard to get them on record, but we know that they've told us they will vote for it when it comes to the floor. Yeah.
So is that part of the effort now, is telling folks who might be supporters? You said that, you've done the surveys that show, as you said, close to 60% support here in the state. Are you telling folks to advocate, to call the legislators and say, bring this to a vote?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's our number one ask, is for, constituents, right? When a lawmaker gets a phone call from 5 constituents on an issue, they really listen. And so that's absolutely our strategy. We're going to be ramping that up in the coming weeks. And we want folks to say, it's time for a vote. It's time to do this. Again, Massachusetts is right there. And if we don't do it, we're just donating tax revenue and jobs to them. So it's time to have a vote. Yeah.
So you talked to us about the hearings coming up and folks being able to testify. Now, medical marijuana was interesting because, folks with medical ailments, might have gone and said, this is why I'm using marijuana. Who do you expect to be coming out to testify as maybe the average person as to why they want the legalization of marijuana?
Sure. Well, we're going to bring a lot of the members of our coalition, which are public health experts. We do have some former law enforcement folks. We have, a lot of folks who look at this as a parent and saying why regulation actually protects young people better. We're going to have folks talking about the experiences of Colorado and Washington. And I think, average folks are going to see this as, just a common sense issue. Why are we punishing adults for using marijuana when it's objectively safer than alcohol? Doesn't cause overdoses, doesn't cause long-term health problems, it's not as addictive, doesn't cause violent behavior. So it doesn't make sense, I think, to the average person that we're going to, spend all these resources punishing adults for marijuana while alcohol is legal. And so I think we'll hear that. I think people are going to talk about the fact that it would make more sense to free up tax revenue, which could be used, again, for a lot of different things. It could lower other taxes that maybe people are more opposed to. And then lastly, I think the economic engine. I mean, there's a lot of folks who, especially young people, who see the jobs being created in Colorado, and, they want that to be here. And I think we do need to provide more opportunities, for folks here in our state, and this is a way to do that.
Any concern in the Trump administration and indications that he's made about the federal regulation and oversight of marijuana? I mean, obviously at this point it's just indications that he's giving, but what's the concern on the national level?
Sure. I mean, I think it would be extremely unpopular. We just saw a poll come out a few weeks ago that 71% of voters in the United States don't want the federal government interfering with state laws around marijuana. So, we don't know exactly what they're going to do. All they've said so far is that they're going to look at the Cole memo, which was Obama's sort of guidelines to law enforcement of what to enforce. I suspect the most likely thing is that they're going to, tweak that, maybe tighten some things up there. But I think that if they really try to crack down on states like Colorado and Washington, I mean, the toothpaste is already out of the tube. It's going to be very difficult and very resource intensive for federal agents to go in and try to shut down these states. So, again, we're waiting to see more clarity. But I think at this point, we're going full steam ahead. There's 8 other states that have passed these laws, and I think as long as 8 other states are moving forward, including Massachusetts, then Rhode Island should feel safe to move forward as well.
And is there any sense, here we are in 2017, again, 2018 is an election year,
yeah,
and a gubernatorial cycle, mayoral cycle. Is there a sense that it really would have to be passed this year and become the political third rail in 2018?
Well, I think the sooner the better, right? I mean, again, we have a failed policy now. We need to fix it. I mean, there's an illicit market. The longer we wait, the more that market continues, the less time we have to collect revenue and create jobs. So, I mean, I think that every month that goes by is sort of a lost opportunity here. In terms of it being an election year, it's just sort of common political wisdom that legislators, any elected official, they don't like to do controversial things in election years. So, but primarily we want to do it this year because A, it's good public policy, and B, if we don't, then that means Massachusetts is definitely going to get a head start on us. We still have a chance to be on par with Massachusetts if we pass a bill this year. But if we don't, then we're into the next year, and we're not going to be able to get stores open in time to be competitive with Massachusetts.
And you told us before, what are the numbers that we're looking at? What are the revenue projections that you've been putting out there?
Yeah, so we are basing our projections on some research that's been done by marijuana research business firms, and they think that if marijuana is legalized in Rhode Island this year, that by 2020 there could be about 161 million in sales. So if you apply a 30% tax, which is what's in the legislation being considered, that's about $48 million a year annually.
And you talk about some of that money going towards treatment programs. In the legislation, is there a breakdown as to, of that total take on that 30% tax, how the breakdown of that looks like?
Yes. So what it says is, first, you take the money needed to regulate, which I anticipate will be about $3 to $5 million just to pay, the offices that are going to regulate the whole thing. So you take that out, and then the remaining funds, 35% goes to BHDDH for things like recovery treatment programs. 10% will go back to the local towns and municipalities that have marijuana establishments operating in their jurisdiction, and then 5% will go to law enforcement for increased enforcement of impaired driving. And then the rest will go to the general fund, which could be used for any number of things.
And you talk about how much it's going to cost to actually as you said, be put into this regulation. Is there going to have to be a new office created in Rhode Island? I mean, how many people, not just the law enforcement side, but the bureaucracy, so to speak?
Yeah, well, a lot of the regulations that will apply to an adult use market have already been created through the medical marijuana program. So in the last year, we've seen the Department of Business Regulation set up new regulations and really, create the infrastructure that's sort of the groundwork for a legal adult use market. And so a lot of that will carry over. But yes, there will be, in the legislation proposed, there would be an Office of Cannabis Coordination that would be created to oversee all aspects of regulation. And so I suspect you'll see dedicated employees whose job it is to regulate the market.
And again, you talk with us being just behind Massachusetts if we were to legalize this year, and you talk about Massachusetts was going to go online on January 1st, 18, now pushed back to July. If the General Assembly were to approve this before June 2017, how soon would we see something in Rhode Island?
Yeah, well, we could see potentially the existing medical marijuana facilities come online, 6-7 months after passage, and then after that, there would be a period where other applicants could apply. So by 12 months after passage, the legislation would have some number of stores. There's a minimum number of stores to establish by that time. So I think within the year, again, right around the time that Massachusetts is going to be opening up, you could see Rhode Island opening up stores as well.
So the medical marijuana facilities have the first bite at the apple, so to speak, or are they the ones that could be able to implement this first? And then what's the lag time between someone else who wants to grow and open their own business?
Yeah, so there's about a month lag time, and the reason for that is that existing medical marijuana compassion centers are already up and running. They're already cultivating marijuana. They already have regulations, security, et cetera. So it makes sense to go ahead and let them go ahead because they've already set up their systems. So about a month later is when the agency can then start accepting applications from other folks. So those could be accepted very quickly, or there's a little bit of a wiggle room where if they need to take a little more time to consider those applications. But that's, again, 1 month after the existing facilities can open.
So just 1 month.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And no cap on anything. I mean, talk about small businesses. I mean, what would you anticipate? Is it just the Wild West and just open to who's looking to take advantage of this?
Well, I think that what we would like to see, and what the legislation would do is allow the market to dictate how many stores can be open, and that's mostly the way we would like it to go, is for there to be a free open market, there to be competition, and the facilities and the businesses that succeed should succeed, and if there's not enough room, then there's not enough room. I mean, we don't really favor the idea of putting these artificial limits on things. There may be some compromise on that with the legislative body and sort of reaching an agreement there, but that's what we're advocating for, is just more or less a free market where we can see what the demand is and then provide enough to meet that demand.
So how confident are you that 2017 is the year in Rhode Island?
Well, I'm definitely more confident than I've ever been. I mean, I think that most legislators I talk to understand the practical reality that, there are going to be stores along our border in Massachusetts next year. I think they also understand that things are working in Colorado and Washington. So, whereas in previous years it's been more of an abstract discussion, we actually have real empirical data, we actually have real examples to look to, and that gives me a lot more confidence because we see it working in other places. I don't like to put percentages on things, so
just how a sliding scale.
Yeah, I mean, I guess if I had to put a percentage on it, I would say I give it like a 60% chance. But I've been wrong every year, so don't listen.
Well, 60%, that's the level of what you practically see in support. But 59% was the level you said of Rhode Islanders in support of it. Mm-hmm. Well, clearly we'll be keeping tabs on this issue, and we had the former congressman on yesterday. Are you going to be in forums where you have pros and cons in the coming weeks and months?
I suspect so. I mean, I think there's a lot of public interest in this, so I would, certainly be open to debates and discussions, panels, things like that. So,
okay, former Congressman Kennedy, if you're hearing, folks at SAM, as we're trying to do here is just let folks know from both sides and increase the debate. So I appreciate your coming in today to talk more about it here.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, Jared Moffat, Regulate RI, talking about the effort again for legalization here in Rhode Island, speaking about the various factors that he sees here in 2017. His coming in here to the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center does on the heels of former Congressman Patrick Kennedy talking with us yesterday about he is opposed. Now, I did ask Jared if he's going to be involved with forums that has both sides talking about the pros and cons. Hopefully here at Go Local Live, we might be able to facilitate something along those lines. Again, as he mentioned, Mayor of Massachusetts had approved it just last year, coming online next year. All eyes, again, here on Rhode Island to see what happens in 2017.